This episode of Legacy Curious is brought to you by Legacy Protectors. Customize insurance strategies for business owners and families who aspire to create a lasting legacy. Hello there, and welcome to Legacy Curious, the show where we explore what it really means to protect, grow, and pass on everything you've worked so hard to build. I'm your host, David Gravelle. I'm a life insurance strategist, business legacy coach, and founder of Legacy Protectors. Each episode, I sit down with the bold thinkers, entrepreneurs, and everyday visionaries who are turning their values into lasting impact in business, in life, and across generations. Today's guest is Peter Kalven. Peter has an extensive background that includes a diverse range of interests. He's a graduate of Emerson College in Boston with a BFA in Technical Theater and Design, Black History, Asian Art History, and Photography. Over a 40-year career in the entertainment industry, Peter has developed a deep knowledge of production with 25 feature film credits, 250 theater credits, and numerous live performances and concerts. In 1978, Peter, a Chicago-born resident, immigrated to Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and expanded his career. Over time, he further developed his other interests, continuing a career in writing and starting a new one in real estate. While in real estate, he focused on business development, commercial real estate, and multifamily properties or projects. Peter brings comprehensive wisdom that allows him to assemble a fantastic team of talented, generous, and committed people to work together on making the world a better place. Because it should be. And welcome, Peter. Great to have you here today. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking. I'm delighted to do this.
Great. Well, the first thing we do around here is just to get to know you as a person. So why don't you start off with just telling us a bit about, your young life, where you grew up, where you were born, and what that was like.
Okay. So some of the folks watching this may know I grew up on the south side of Chicago, fairly close to the University of Chicago, and my current interest obviously is with agriculture. And my exposure to agriculture as a child was whenever it rained, I knew what a cow smelled like because the stockyards location was not that far from where I actually grew up. But I grew up around the University of Chicago, as it happens, and I have a very privileged past, lived in some very nice housing and the rest of it. My father was a professor of law at the University of Chicago and is recognized as one of the leading legal minds of the 20th century with respect to the freedom of speech and a type of lawsuit called a tort, liability lawsuits when an accident has taken place. And one of the factors of my childhood that I think has influenced as we were talking beforehand, has influenced my adulthood is we were participants always in table conversation. Didn't matter who the guest was, whether it was, another professor of law, students of his, an attorney general of the United States, a Supreme Court justice. It didn't matter who was at the table. Or even because it's the University of Chicago, some of the physicists that split the atom. So I have this very privileged intellectual background. But I was the quiet one. I just sat there and listened, right? My older brothers were more rambunctious and more challenging. And of course it was the 60s and, you could have the Jack Nicholson moment. You don't understand the truth, those kinds of things.
Sure.
Sure. Yeah, but we were a fairly cohesive group, full of conversation. Unfortunately, my father died when I was 21 and just finishing university. And I'm the member of the family who went off in a different direction. My father was a teacher. My sister's a teacher. My oldest brother is a writer and editor. My second brother became a lawyer, and I'm the one that went, I'm going to do the arts. And so I went off, and my degree is from Emerson College in Boston. So those people who have any interest in either speech pathology or the entertainment mass communication industry might recognize the name because it's a fairly well-known school for that. And I have a very peculiar degree. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Technical Theater and Design. So that allowed me a professional career in the entertainment industry as a production technician primarily. But I've got 25 feature film credits. I've got 250 play credits. I've got a similar number of national account commercials. I worked for several years for a television station as their head of staging. Much of the work was unionized and all of that. And so lots of interesting interaction with all of that experience. And along the way, after my first marriage ended, my second wife suggested I take out a real estate license. And so I did so because working in the arts, particularly in the entertainment industry, and I'm located now in Alberta, Canada, there's a lot of film work and a lot of things going on, but it's very seasonal activity. Not quite like the fisheries, but you get hired for a 3-month period and then you're off and so on. And so, selling homes and whatever seemed like a reasonable thing to follow. That led me into selling luxury homes and becoming acquainted with some fairly strong entrepreneurial, wealth managed people. And I shifted into commercial real estate and developed an interest in working with hoteliers and income generating properties. Partly because of the numbers involved. I found those large numbers fascinating to analyze. So I have this odd teamwork, greed management experience with numbers.
Right.
One of the properties I sold with a partner of mine was situated in Ottawa, newly built apartment complex, fully furnished, a furnished apartment system, about a city block away from the U.S. Embassy. I never saw the building, but I worked out its value. I did the accounting work to determine its value and what would be fair market price, the range of a fair market price for the property, and ultimately it sold for that. And I developed a very good reputation for accurately pricing, both in the luxury houses and in these multi-million-dollar properties, based on just a combination of common sense and the recognition that different owners operate differently and listening very carefully to the parties involved in determining what they want to do. So one of the key skills I believe I developed was listening. And I would, you can't do sales if you don't listen. And I'm adverse to the hard sale technologies and personalities. I'm much more the let me find out what your needs are and let me address those. I know you have wants, but let me make sure I've hit your needs. Because if I satisfy your needs, your wants are more malleable, if you will. If the house fits or the property fits in a number of different ways, that you want it to be in Miami and happens to be in Nunavut is just
Right. It's not going to fly.
Yeah, but if it's making you more money, what do you care, right? And that type of thing. So it also introduced me to a number of greedy people, and I have developed as I've aged now. I'm now in retirement. I've developed kind of a risk adversity to greedy people who are too selfish. We're experiencing that politically around the world, not just in the United States. And as a consequence, I'm noticing a decline in what I believe to be essential services in the care of those who are less fortunate than we are. And so I'm very much involved in social media. I'm big on TikTok. I was big on Facebook previous to that. Excuse me for a second. And I developed a very good friendship with an agriculturalist in Uganda about a decade ago, and similarly with a young lawyer in Serbia, who had gone through the NATO situation in Serbia. And we decided, you know what, we should create, the agriculturalist has an active NGO. But Vojta, the lawyer, and myself, and Peter, the agriculturist, started looking at trying to create a global network organization. I looked first in Canada, was advised that the accounting costs would be prohibitive. And certainly at that stage, they were. We then looked at potentially doing something in Belgrade or something in Cyprus and finding the right people to fit the particular places. And as it happened, I was introduced here to Alignable. Coincidentally, a number of things were converging all at once. Trump's tariffs, lack of USAID, the expansion, explosion in AI, solar, internet connectivity, all of these various elements. And it became apparent to me that you could operate as a nonprofit business in the ether. You don't have to have trucks and equipment and bags of food. You're not solving anybody's problems. If you do, they're essential in disaster relief, but they are not essential in day-to-day life because you give somebody something as a gift and they have no ownership or appreciation for it. So what has evolved is a philosophy of creating innovative, scalable, data-driven, repeatable programs on the theory of pay it forward, on the theory of creating social and economic cooperatives so that, you start with a seed, but at the end of the day, in a given program, you may end up with an oak tree and the ability to provide for those families involved economic leverage in the marketplace that they wouldn't otherwise have as individuals. So, together, all of Benjamin Franklin's concepts.
Right.
And just trying to apply that practically. And what I notice in watching my competition, which would be any other generous thing, some are very focused on a specific element, which I applaud. Some are very focused on what I would call poverty porn. It is, for example, currently in social media, because of the various refugee issues around the world, there are UN advertisements, which are the poor children with the distended bellies and all of that. And yes, that needs to be addressed. And yes, people need to donate to that if that's what moves them. But half of the world's population, in my view, are subsistence farmers. And that's not a negative. That's people who work hard and happen to farm by hand. They don't have the luxury of John Deere. And so how do we help them? They're only producing 36% of the world's food. How do we incrementally change that number? And the conclusion was, okay, let's work on sharing, learning, and teaching sustainable agriculture to, well, let's call them ancestral farmers, people who are using tools that were designed 3,000 years ago. So we're not coming in to culturally change them. We're not coming in to socially change them. We're not coming in to say, here, we're your saviors. We're just coming in and saying, look, you have a ancestral body of knowledge, and I have access, or we have access to this incredible toolbox. And I was joking about the water and the stockyards. I can go and speak to AI and have one of the amazing things to me is have close to an intellectual conversation with a machine, and have, I'm not using AI to do mailings and all the things that you can in a business. They're probably all excellent, but that's not what's driving my enthusiasm. My enthusiasm is being driven by the fact that I can get down to the minutia of what should be in your compost pile, at what percentages, at what weight or whatever, to grow your banana tree or your coffee tree or your cassava plant or your beans. And it's different for each of them. Or how do I improve your soil? Because unfortunately, Uganda, which is where we're focused at the present, but we're in Central Africa generally, and we go anywhere in the world as we have the opportunity and grow. The country of Uganda has been a cotton plantation for 2 centuries, and that has depleted the soil's efficiency down below 60%. So one of the things we need to do is just bring the soil back.
Right.
So in terms of the types of things we're doing, I was describing to you before, we have 3 initial projects, and
Yeah, name the organization, Peter, because you haven't told us.
oh yeah,
about
that's
your,
I
yeah,
guess
the
I guess you
organization.
have no idea who we are.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about who you are,
Okay.
and then get into the projects you're working on, and we'll
Okay.
get to how people can get involved.
And I assume you have the ability to share the link in your broadcast in some
And we
form or
will.
fashion.
It'll all be in description. Yeah, we'll have much more there.
Okay.
But
Okay. So what we've incorporated as a nonprofit corporation in the U.S., and we qualify as a 501c3. One of my directors is the registered executive, and it's if anything goes wrong, it's his name. It's his head on the block. But we've set up what is called the Kayonza, Kayon. I'll have to be Canadian here. ZA Global Network, and Kayonza is a lovely little community, a village in southwestern Uganda. Uganda has a little tip that comes down like Florida, except it's on the western side. And it's not shaped like Florida, but the similar idea, right? A peninsula coming out of the country. And Kayonza is adjacent to what is known as the Bwindi Impenetrable National Park, which happens to be the location for 40% of the surviving silverback gorillas in the wild in the world. And it's connected to the Congo tropical forest basin, which for people in New York and Connecticut and whatever is the source of all their rain. So similar to the Amazon, you don't want deforestation impacting that particular aquifer, if I can call it that. And so Peter, my partner in Uganda, he started out with the concern of dealing with the local poachers and people deforestation or performing deforestation to collect firewood, and saying we have to do better.
Which they need to cook with, right? And they need
Right,
that
exactly.
every day, right?
So coming up with solutions for that. And so the sustainable agriculture aspect of this originates with his efforts to change the direction. And he's quite successfully, over a 10-year period, had an influence on about 65,000 farmers. So and his particular district, the Kanunga district, is about 250,000 people. Uganda as a whole is about 40 million people. It's made up of districts throughout. So all of them are roughly the same size population-wise. Kayonza and Kanunga are mountainous, hilly areas. And as you go east across, and if you look at a map of Uganda, you've got, similar to Hudson Bay, you have Lake Victoria that cuts an arc into Uganda. So you go across that southern plain to the east, and you end up in grassland and plains and what I would suspect some people would consider traditional Africa. And there's, safari.
Right. It is a safari destination, right?
Yeah, in some respects. Yeah. And then as you get to eastern Uganda, you go back into the mountains leading into Kenya. You're adjacent to Rwanda and Tanzania on the south. You're adjacent to the DCR on the west, and you have Sudan to the north and Kenya to the east. So you have in Kenya a relatively stable country that has access to the ocean. In Tanzania, I'm not very familiar, quite honestly, with Tanzania's circumstances to date. Rwanda, we know from horrific stories out of Rwanda, but the circumstances have settled. And Congo has been the victim of, just horrific aspects of colonialism, in that the African culture is very focused on I don't want to use the word rape, but the pillage of resources that, unfortunately, the world has come to Africa and has viewed it as a place to mine and do things, which is fine, but they haven't returned portions of that wealth locally. That's changing. And we're very aware of that changing. So our effort is the idea of using local resources, such as my partner Peter, who's operating already an agricultural related entity to train people. And we have several projects along the way of different things. But our first three projects, the first is with respect to poultry. The second is with respect to communications, and the third is with respect to creating some accessible potable water. And basically, the logic is food speaks every language, and everything emanates from the foundation of food. So our long-term focus will always be on the sustainable agriculture part. However, we will affiliate and we will support and we will do things that help education or economic development where and when we can. And we will put in infrastructure if it serves our purpose, and we will share it with others if it serves theirs. So our first program is to provide 300 families in the Kanunga, Kayonza area with a flock of 18 egg-laying hens, local and Kurioler birds that are everything in the world wants to kill a chicken. So we need to find species and breeds that are capable of withstanding the varied climatic conditions as well as the potential predators, but more importantly, the disease issues. So everybody's aware of avian flu, things like that. One of my advisors is a world-renowned an immunologist, pathologist dealing in those kinds of things. So we're looking to experts to help us in that process. In any event, 300 families over a 30-month period receiving these chickens. They get a rooster, and apparently geese protect chickens. So one goose. So apparently geese will attack the mongoose.
Who knew there was a symbiotic relationship between
there's a symbiotic. If they're raised together, a goose will protect a chicken from a mongoose, which is the type of weasel that is the threat to the stock of chickens. So we're providing the chickens. We are customizing, and this is where we're sort of changing the paradigm, because originally it was, okay, you guys build your coops and pens. We'll provide the money for that. That doesn't cost anything. In our research, we've determined that everything likes to kill a chicken. There's a risk of just the dust from the dirt infecting the lungs of the chicken and killing them. So we are creating pens that are theft resistant from people, protected from a variety of other health issues for the birds. We're providing waterers and feeders, very simple, but we then have control over the volume of food and water, and that it technically should allow us to fatten those chickens up that are going to market as broilers, but it also should help us control the pests that mice and whatever that might infect, and not only eat but infect the feed. And as a spin-off of that, we may eventually be doing our own seeds and generating our own feed. But we're providing 10 families a month, 18 birds, a rooster, and a goose, 4 months worth of food, veterinary care for the birds, and the pen and the coop. And likely, it's a decision we have to make, but likely, again, because we don't want it all to be viewed as a gift, because if you give someone a gift, it's a gift and they don't take ownership of it.
Right.
So similar to micro banking, we may ask the farmers to give us, we're leasing the pens and the coops. They own them, but they're leasing them from us, and the small amount of money is coming back to the charity to help our operating costs or whatever, but to not inflict usury on them, but to simply say, you're a business and we're a
Right.
business, and
That's it.
let's have a business to business
Right.
relationship.
Right. And all
And
that's part of that education, frankly, of being a successful farmer is being able to manage it as a business and
right, and
understanding when
it
you want to
as
grow that, there's going to be cost and expense that you need to account for and plan for. And hopefully this gives them some of that education and
and
experience.
and and I think the benefit of that in the end of the day is, on the theory of how we're doing this with the chickens, is theoretically, if we're successful with all of our projections, the first 10 families at 4 months will have hatchlings. Now, unfortunately for the males, there's no demand for male birds, so they become broilers. They go off to the market as food, but they have to be about 4 months old, and 4 months old is the age where the hens start being productive. And the particular species of hens we're using can be productive anywhere from 2 to 8 years. So, we have to look as we go forward with the turnover, but we're generating birds all along. So the first 10 families have hatchlings, and the theory is that from those hatchlings, they can provide the birds to the 11th or 41st family, depending on how you count. And how that works out for us is at 18 months, the families that have been provided with birds now are providing birds to the remaining families that are coming on stream. And then at 30 months, what happens is we have 300 families producing eggs net of their nutritional needs. It turns out the calculation, and I believe the calculation is correct given the various nature of the different birds, and again the math of AI. We're producing 75,000 farm fresh eggs a month, which then gives these 300 families, in my view, a cooperative market that they can become a poultry business collectively, and have virtually very strong control of the value of their market. Um, Turns out that farm fresh eggs, if you do not wash the gel, I'll call it, that when the egg extracts from the chicken or extrudes from the chicken, they keep for 3 weeks. So basically, you can be providing the market with 75,000 eggs, in a population of 250,000 people, every month, which is a significant contribution to the families that are there. Or we take it, we're so many hours from Kampala and the rest. But we also potentially, moves us now more into the communication step that we're doing. Part of the concept here is to take advantage of the satellite internet available. So what we want to get is one feed. Likely will be Starlink because we have very little choice at the present. There's some alternatives in the future. So Starlink provides a feed, and there is a version of wireless connectivity available, that a router that creates its own network, basically its own URL, and we can through normal wireless routers and the combination of these connectivity routers, create from 1 square mile up to 10 square miles of dedicated internet connectivity off the one feed. We'll use that for trail cameras, so we can maybe do a subscription to watching gorillas. We'll do that, the sunrise and sunset. I mean, the mountains of Uganda, it's going to be stunning as a subscription. We'll do that in order to have the type of communication you and I are now having, where currently, if the cell service defaults, I lose connection. We will have the ability as a result of that, and solar power and the rest of it. We should have the ability for a mobile unit where you can actually talk directly to the farmer in the middle of nowhere, Uganda, from the middle of nowhere, North America or Europe, which I believe for the public donor is an opportunity to see that because we don't have a building, because we don't have trucks, because we don't have, we will have contracted employees, but we don't have paid staff at this stage, nor are we seeking to have it. My current administrative group is all voluntary. We exist in the ether. So our overhead expenses are our subscriptions to the various things that we have to be subscribed to. Uh, but ideally, our overhead expense should provide us with some capital we can use to then invest in other business that allows us a dividend or a share in profits that we can redirect back to our work. Excuse me. So that connectivity creates an opportunity, and then it also creates the opportunity for the 4-H clubs and the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts and all of these children in schools in Uganda to interact and culturally change the perception when you and I know we shouldn't be talking politics, but when you have political leaders demeaning other countries as being less than anything else, I think it's incumbent on us to make sure our children know these are real people. They're real people with the same desires. Their needs are not their needs.
Humanized much more.
They're humanized, and these kids,
fun.
these kids are charming. The photos I see of these children, they're beautiful children.
Yeah.
They're children,
Yeah.
right? I'm blessed. I mean, you know from before this started, my grandkids showed up with lunch for me. They're no different than my grandkids.
Exactly.
They're beautiful, and that's part of. I know you're going to ask me at some point about legacy. I believe I'm on the right side of history for a number of things. My father's achievements, my brother's achievements, and okay, I've got this high functioning family, and I'm the black sheep, if you will, and it's my turn now as I approach the end of my life to try and kick in and do something. But what I'm looking for for the Kayonza Global Network is that this entity that we collectively create, because this has gone from 3 guys to over 50 all over the world. And people with the same enthusiasm you've had about your interest in it, to people who, like my mentioning of the epidemiologist, who are experts at various things, saying, yeah, I want to give you some time and information. I'm happy to answer that question. I'm happy to have a conversation with a Farmer Joe in the middle of nowhere, because that has an impact, So we have,
and maybe speak a bit to that, Peter, because my viewers who are watching are entrepreneurs that will be retired someday, maybe soon, and they're going to want to, reflect on some of the things that they want to get involved in to give back. How were you able to do this? What, you just you said, you started with 3 people.
Well, it comes apart.
How could they do it too? I guess you're going to give advice to them to create the same type of thing or similar, or just get involved. Talk to that if you could.
I think again, the first order of business is listening, and discerning from your listening what the need actually is, whatever it is you're addressing. I mean, I've had suggestions about buying, band instruments for schools in the middle of Uganda, and that's a very good idea for that cultural advantage. But again, I look at it and go, okay, food precedes all of these good things. And the experience that has probably contributed the most to this was at the end of my real estate career prior to 2019. I had created a development company to do infill development in my community, taking not necessarily dilapidated, but underused land and revitalizing it. And, I had a very good project that had the support of the city planning, had the support of the mayor. Unfortunately, the one person who lived next door was not a particularly pleasant individual. I had what turned out to be ultimately the potential of a $5 million project. and my investor was a doctor who could afford to provide the money, and his lawyer was a skeptic like the person next door, and that collapsed at just 2019 or so, while we were three-quarters the way through actually getting the permits to do everything. And I was then diagnosed with stage 3 colorectal cancer. And it was like, okay, life's thrown me a couple of curveballs. To my good fortune, I'm, blessed by living in Canada and have the access to universal health care. And it was just as COVID was rearing its ugly head. And the Canadian healthcare system is a triage system, and I found myself at the front of the line. And so while the hospitals were all shutting down or closing off in all kinds of ways and canceling surgeries left, right, and center, I was at the front of the line through radiation, chemotherapy, surgery, hospital stay, the whole thing, and was a witness to the impact on the hospital staff of COVID. And my partner, she worked in seniors housing at the time. And in December of 2020, virtually all of her residents in the particular unit that she was in died within a matter of days due to COVID. And so I had an issue with the people who were anti-vax. I had an issue with the people who were in denial, because in 2020 it was still not right. We were under 1 million deaths and so on and so forth. And and I watched my partner be devastated. I mean, she's in a career that you're quite comfortable with the loss of life, but not everybody. It's not like being on the deck of the Titanic. And somehow all of those events, I looked at the values of all of my previous clients, and there were a couple of very good businessmen among my clients. And what stood out was particularly one client who came out of the Northwest Territories with $1 million. He had started his career as a dishwasher, coming in from another country. He went into the north, up to the Arctic, basically, worked as a dishwasher, eventually saved up enough money or learned to become a cook, and eventually saved up enough money to buy the restaurant, and eventually saved up enough money to take $1 million from selling the restaurant and build a hotel. And so he built a hotel, in the virtually middle of nowhere, but a good little hotel that was competitive, had investors, and he turned his $1 million effort to what is now a $100 million portfolio. And all the way along, he's never been greedy. He's always held 51% of whatever his property is, but he has always deferred to his investors first. And so just recently I had a conversation with him because I needed to make an arrangement for a conference room at a hotel. And I was asking about a couple of the investors that I know, and he's bought them out now. So, after 15, 20 years, and not a single one of them ever lost money. He would absorb in his 51%, and he would never borrow past a certain percentage to get what he was doing done. So if he didn't have the cash, he wouldn't borrow until he did have the cash. And what I experienced in real estate was watching many, many investors thinking, oh, well, the way to do this is you leverage and you leverage and you leverage, and your own risk is only, a smidgen of all of the risk attached to whatever it is. And ultimately, if it goes well, no problem. If it goes sideways, you've screwed many, many people.
You've burned a lot of bridges through that process. Right?
And you do that. And in the case of this particular client, that ethic of his is what stuck with me, because we used to, prior to my cancer, I was traveling all the time. We'd go in a vehicle and we'd drive across the country, and the whole time he'd be sharing his ideas and talking to me. So I got this wonderful master's of business education from an actual businessman. And almost all of it lacked the hyperpole of modern business and all the get-rich-quick aspect of business. It's listen, work hard, treat your people well, treat your investors better. And that's what I came away with. I come out of the film and theater world as no one artist makes this a success. It's a cumulative teamwork event. And so those two elements have given me this kind of interesting mindset, I think, in terms of, okay, we have to solve this problem. You're angry. You have this. Well, we're a team. Let's figure it out. There's no reason for you to go to bed angry. Let's find a way to make it work, satisfy you, satisfy what my goals are, satisfy our principles. And I think the other element I take away from my client is remain focused. This is what I'm doing. So, for example, I would show him a really good piece of land somewhere to put a hotel on. And he had an amazing talent. He could walk onto a piece of land and visually measure it. And he was accurate repeatedly so he knew in a few minutes of standing on a piece of land, I can put so many rooms on this property. And I was always fascinated by that too. But what was interesting is he'd go, no, it's too far away from the restaurants. And he wouldn't change his mind, right? And interestingly enough, I've driven past some of the sites that I've identified to him previously as good sites for hotels. There are now hotels there. And one of the ways you judge a hotel is the parking lot full after 5.
Right.
And he was right. So, I guess the other aspect of this to other entrepreneurial types, one, remember that you fall on your face and you learn from your mistakes. They are not failures. They are educational opportunities. And you're going to have your nose sticking out of the back of your head more often than the front. But at some point, it all is going to gel. Two, those gut instincts that are telling you, no, this doesn't, don't let somebody hard sell you into something you do not believe or you do not see the benefit of. And three, be honest to yourself, be honest with your clientele. You come across, and this has been my experience here with taking advantage of all the networking that's available to both of us. You come across as genuine, and I mean that sincerely. I don't mean you put on being genuine. You don't act genuine. You are genuine. It's the old birds of a feather flock together concept that good works generate good works.
That's right. It attracts that. They put out that energy. It's going to attract
a positive energy. And in all of the types of internet networking that we're doing, we're all sitting in. I'm sitting in what's basically a bonus room. It may ultimately be the headquarters of a large international activity, or it may just be my fantasy example. That's what entrepreneurism is about.
Right? Isn't that the beautiful conundrum we're all in? That, it all starts off with an idea, some electricity between our ears, and it turns into something that is just amazing. That's why I love, talking to them. People like you, it just fascinate me with what we're able to do out of thin air, it feels like.
Yeah, and you were asking me, what's my function in our group? I would like to think I'm that electricity. I keep describing myself to people as the guy whose brain is a ping pong ball in a wind tunnel. Because believe it or not, I enjoyed my conversation with a machine. Right? I enjoyed the questions the machine was asking.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that. It's illuminating. I'm talking to something smarter than me. And I am so curious that when it sheds light on a situation and gets me insight,
it turns to me and say, it asks me, do you want me to do this? Would you like me to explain this? Would you? And it's like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I would like to know. It's my fear with it, if to sort of get into the social, because I think part of what's motivating what's happening for me is collectively, I think we all recognize there's a tsunami of change coming.
Yeah.
I happen to be one of the fortunate ones who have landed on the top of the crest. Whether I surf or drown remains to be seen. But I'm looking at it. It's a change. It's a change like the introduction of the cotton gin. It's a change like the introduction of the combustion engine. It's a change like the Industrial Revolution. We don't know yet what we're going to call this change, but all of these elements, solar, internet, social media, AI, not just the AI you and I are using for research, but AI that basically brushes your teeth.
Right. All the robotic. That's the next agentic AI. That's right.
Yeah, right. And, at some point in time, my grandchildren will not experience learning in the way that I've learned.
Right.
I have a library full of books that I absolutely enjoy, and my greatest pleasure is to sit down with a book. That is likely to disappear, right? They'll get the AI Cole's notes. They may get the pleasure of reading it on a Kindle. But they won't have the physical pleasure of holding, the first edition of somebody's book.
Right. It'll become more and more rare and precious.
Yeah, it'll be like an old LP record, a pressed LP. Yeah, it's like fantastic.
Nostalgia. Right.
Yeah, but and it's kind of frightening. And my suspicion is, at some point in time, you and I will be sitting on a park bench somewhere having a conversation with something that looks like us, but's a machine.
Yeah.
Right? It's perhaps our nanny. It's perhaps our healthcare provider. It's perhaps our lawyer. It could very well be, the guy who's cooking dinner. Yeah, it could.
Right.
Ultimately, yes, it takes time for them to robotically get all the movements I can do, and so I'm going, okay, so that's happening in the first world. What's happening in the rest of the world? Yeah. And how does the guy who is literally at the bottom of the pile, how does he comprehend that, and how can all of that help him?
Right, serve him too, right? You can't be leaving others behind by this. This, I think, is the magic of where we're headed, is that it has the potential to change everyone's life in meaningful ways if we use it correctly. And it sounds like that, you've described a lot of the work that you're doing now as in the guise of, your retirement projects, but it seems to me that you've been building towards this your whole life. Like the people skills you have now were the ones that you learned from a lifetime, and the experience and the knowledge of is just a lifetime's worth of skill sets that are lining now. And so, answer our $1 million question around here on your legacy, Peter. Let's get to that. What, when you think of what you want to be remembered for, what comes to mind?
Well, I mean, I'd like to be remembered for my sense of humor, but that's only for the people that have the privilege of sharing a few minutes with me when I'm in a funny mood. But I think the key to it is that I've been blessed with a good life. I'm trying to create the opportunity for others to experience a good life. I'm working towards making it a better world because it should be a better world. And the legacy in my mind is that whatever kindling we're lighting now continues to burn. That this entity that I'm creating, I have no illusions. Being a cancer patient and all these other things in my age, I have no illusions about long-term legacy. So my priority now is to create this solid foundation of a functional nonprofit business that can continue to function on the basis of food speaks every language and address that, whether it's in Uganda or a war-torn area like Gaza or Sudan or Ukraine or, an El Salvadorian prison scenario. How do we make the bottom half of humanity, who are perfectly solid and good people, dedicated to very much the same values we have, family and all of that. How do we ease their existence and allow them the nobility of self-ownership and self-pride? And so, perhaps it is, that we've left a legacy of empowerment, and that would be it's not me, it's the idea of what we're creating collectively, this team. Let's create something that is worthwhile. And it's very much in my mind the spirit of the people that have joined us. You know, we have several different ways in which people can interact with us. Obviously, we have the website. Obviously, I'm participating in social media and broadcasting it whatever I can. And it's not to become the Ozzy Osbourne of charities, in the acknowledging his recent passing. I never really liked his music, but I always admired his gumption. you know? And so, and that's true of many talents, right? I mean, if I could be the George Burns, if I lived that long, I'd be happy, but that's not going to happen. So, so it's towards making the world a better place.
Yeah, well, great. Well, we'll have all the contact information in the description. And so we'll encourage everyone to reach out, learn more, get involved if they feel so called to, help and participate. Thanks so much for joining us today. And, potentially we'll have you back on when you have some more updates to share and maybe some new changes to the organization that you want to launch.
Well, I think if nothing else, I might be able to share some pretty cute pictures of gorillas. And other things. No, I think my sense of this is that we're going to be blessed with good success. It's just a matter of time and hard work. So thank you for that. Thank you for the courtesy of asking.
We're just so happy to help in any way we can, Peter. Again, this is what this channel is for to have people like you on to help elevate them, get the message out, and we want to be known for that here. That's part of our legacy. So
and anybody who's listening, if they want to connect with us, by all means, please do. All right. Take care. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you to our listeners and audience for spending time with us today on Legacy Curious. I hope this conversation gave you some insight, encouragement, or just that little spark you needed to keep you moving forward in your own legacy journey. If you got value from today's episode, please take a second to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone else who's building something that matters. And if you're ready to take that next step, protecting your business, planning for retirement, or passing on your legacy with purpose, head to legacyprotectors.life to schedule a conversation. Until next time, I'm your host, David Gravelle, reminding you to stay curious, stay committed, and keep building something worth passing on.